Friend, literally send this episode to anyone you know who is in a service-based field. So we're talking medical, beauty, dental. Anyone in these industries need to hear this conversation. So today on the show, I was so fortunate to sit down with Candy Clancy, who is the general manager of Micrylium Laboratories, which is here in Canada. Micrylium is leading the way in all things infection control, especially in the intermediate hospital grade scenario that you all should have in your clinic. So you're probably thinking right now, like, yeah, I use an intermediate disinfectant in my clinic, and you're thinking of all the different name brands in your head. And then you're also thinking of over-the-shelf disinfectants that you see at the grocery store. And you're probably like, yeah, Rach, what are you talking about? Like, it can't be that interesting. Like, I'm already aware of what to use. Well, friend, today you're going to learn that most likely the items that you're using right now at home to keep your family safe, and then in your clinic to keep your staff and your patients safe, actually might not be the best product to be using for a variety of different reasons. This episode is so interesting because I do find that there is a gap between not only the different service-based industries, but also in the information. Even when it comes to regulatory bodies and public health units, there seems to be different protocols or notes on products. I mean, I've personally had it when I've had an inspector come into my clinic and, they questioned the disinfectant that we were using at the time. And it was a very well-known name brand disinfectant. And I'm like, how don't you know what this is? They actually had to read the label, figure out what the kill time was and the viruses, etc. Like all of the protocols that it was meeting. I think that's so interesting because shouldn't the inspector know the typical brands that are out there? And if they don't, well, how do they actually know what to be looking for? And also, if someone had actually told me the truth on that product, then believe me, I would have never used it. So long story short, this episode is going to be so helpful for you, and I can't wait for you to hear it. And thank you so much again to Micrylium for letting us have this conversation so we can help spread it to the masses. If you are a teeth whitening or tooth gem specialist, this is the podcast for you. My name's Rach, and I am the industry leader of all things teeth entrepreneurship. Together, let's learn from real-life experiences to must-have brands on how to take your business to the next level and leave that 9-to-5. Friend, welcome to Whitening Wednesday, and I'm so glad you are here. Let's build a safe industry together. Friend, enjoy this conversation, and don't forget to purchase all of your Micrylium products with your favorite dealer. And remember, Fern Whitening Supplies is an authorized dealer with Micrylium Laboratories. Let's get on with the show. Happy Whitening Wednesday. Today on the show, I'm so excited to bring Candy on. Candy is the master of all things disinfectant. We're going to dive into it. And I really wanted Candy to come on the show because, let's be honest, there's a lot of relatively untrue or misguided information out there about the safety on disinfectants. So, as we know, in the entrepreneurial space that we are all in, if that's beauty, medical, or dental, disinfecting is the core of patient and client safety. So Candy, tell us, how did you get immersed into this crazy world of disinfecting?
Well, I would say I didn't come at it directly. I was doing some formulating. My background is science, and I had formulated a solvent. And I was looking for someone to manufacture it for me in Canada. So I happened upon Mr. Dean Swift. And Dean Swift and unfortunately he's passed away now, but he is the founder of Micrylium Disinfectants. And we established a positive relationship, a working relationship. And then he asked me if I would be interested in joining the company. So I said, well, that depends on what you're offering the public, not necessarily to me as a job, but what is the offering to the public? Tell me about your philosophy, your product, what it does, how good is it? And it wasn't very long after learning all about the products and his philosophy that I decided I'm in. And I've been in for 14 years. And it's a great privilege to represent such integral products and in a way that just makes disinfection very simple for people, very natural, and very safe.
Absolutely. And I bet over the 14 years, you've probably seen lots of different products come to the market and either do well or not do well. And also, I'm sure you've seen the difference of, especially here in Ontario. I mean, I know you're Canada wide, etc. wide, but I'm sure you've seen just even in our home base here, all the different things with public health. This is a yes. Now it's not a yes. This is a no. Now this is not a no. Like,
Yes.
I'm sure you have been in the thick of it and are just, beyond frustrated and eye rolling. So tell us, through your years of experience, can you think of one time that you've gone into either, a medical spa, beauty professional location, or a dental office that you've seen a process and you've just like been shocked as if you are doing this? Can you think of any crazy situations that you're like, oh my goodness, it is wild what can go on without proper education?
All right. So, how about a prominent hospital in Ontario, Canada? And they had an outbreak in the intensive care unit of a pathogen called Pseudomonas aeruginosa, which is a very deadly pathogen. It was floating around through the air, and it was making the people who were already in intensive care even more sick, and of course, putting them in an even more life threatening circumstance. So we were called in, and it was identified that the Pseudomonas was colonizing in the gooseneck of the drain of the sink in the nurse's station inside of the intensive care unit. And the way it was colonizing was that the nurses were putting the remnants of their smoothies down the sink before throwing out the cup.
Oh my goodness.
So, of course, every time they would run the water, the Pseudomonas would aerosolize up into the air and start floating through the room, was inhaled by the people in the intensive care beds, and they became infected. So we thought that was very crazy.
That's
And
so
we
crazy.
had to put a protocol in place to disinfect the drains and make sure that people weren't putting things down the drain that could get caught in the trap and therefore be a perfect growing environment for pathogens.
Absolutely. And that is just probably one of those things where the nurses would have just thought, or any professional kind of in that quick environment would be like, oh, I'm just rinsing out my smoothie for the day. Like, no big deal. Like, here you go. Like, it's just one of those things that if you haven't been taught properly about the different pathogens, etc., we miss those things. I mean, I know, especially coming from the dental background, our IPAC checklist is so specific about like the steri base stations or any sink stations or even our fridges, etc. There is no outside food and drinks allowed at any of these stations whatsoever. And it's something that makes sense, especially as you mentioned this here. But I bet it's probably one of those things where maybe you know about it, but just out of habit, or if no one is reminding you not to do that, the habit just starts and continues. But that is so crazy. That is so scary.
Yes, I thought it was very scary. And Yes, the dental industry is quite pristine in these matters. The hospitals evidently not so much. And I find the aesthetic industry, they're very keen to catch on to it. I know historically a lot of the aesthetic instruments were rinsed under the sink and, a toothbrush and some soap was employed. But what I'm trying to bring out to the forefront is that all of these germs are then coming up in little water droplets, little microscopic water droplets, and they literally float around and they land on surfaces. They land on you. They go up your nose. It's just, and of course, in the dental industry, they know better. It's right into an ultrasonic or an immersion bath and possibly the ultrasonic and then into the autoclave. So the estheticians are catching on beautifully, though, I must say.
Yes, and you don't know what you don't know, right? So the more information we can get out there, the better. So I think the next best topic would be, okay, what actually happens? Like, what is the goal when you are, say, disinfecting after a patient? Let's say we just did a chairside teeth whitening session and our room, of course, is now dirty, right? The patient left. We have our tray that's full of maybe a gauze that are covered in saliva or gel that you've removed from the mouth on a microbrush that's sitting on the tray. And then, of course, you have the chair that, hey, the saliva, like there's no drool or anything on the chair, but walk us through why, even though you visually cannot see a soiled area, why it is still the utmost important to be contacting all these areas with intermediate disinfectants.
All right. Well, let's talk about, the primary rules of disinfection, which are very simple. When we're looking into a circumstance where there's infective pathogens, we want to look at the level of infective dose. In other words, well, how many are there? How many germs are actually on this surface? What is the germ? How contagious is it? How dangerous is it? We want to look at the route of infection. Does the person have a hangnail or a blister? Have you just waxed the legs?
Yeah.
Right?
So true. I didn't even think of that. Holy smokes.
Yeah. And of course, then, the up close and personal, the aesthetic industry to me is so beautiful because it is a very up close and personal service. But that brings with it contamination, unfortunately.
Absolutely.
Into the eyes, into the nose, into the mouth, or any kind of abrasion. So basically, what is it? How much is there? Where is it entering the body? What kind of damage can this germ do? And I always, just out of good conscience, say to people, let's not forget your own immune system. You want to keep that in tip-top shape at all times.
Yes, and you never know what your client could have, right? I mean, in the sense of course, you're going to have your medical history form, etc., but you don't know if your client is super stressed and really low on vitamins and, could be picking up those pathogens that you are not, but they could, right?
That's right. So, of course, you don't want to get sick. You certainly don't want to make anyone else sick, and you want to keep public health happy. So there's so many good reasons to have good protocols in place. And getting back to the immune system, a person who is diabetic in particular, they're very vulnerable to infection, and it can really go the wrong way. So you might not even be aware of these things when you're working with somebody. So again, operate on the side of caution. So the next thing I talk about is, well, how easy is it to disinfect an area? And I'd have to answer really, really easy. If you are using a product that has a formula that actually can do the job. And when I say do the job, I mean on any colony forming unit, in other words, bunch of bugs, that's what that means, colony forming unit, that is a fungi, bacteria, or virus. So you want to look for a disinfectant that on the label, and the label is everything for disinfectants. We cannot put anything on our labels that isn't approved by Health Canada or the EPA for the United States. It's illegal. It comes with big fines. So it must be approved. But in order to be approved, we have to prove to them, the governing bodies, that this product does in fact do what we say it does. It goes through very rigorous testing, and then we can make a claim. So when we make a claim of killing tuberculosis, which is your gold standard, it means we've been in laboratory testing. We've killed the TB with this particular formula. And the other thing that is very interesting, and I realize, how would people even know this? You're in the grocery store and you see a very popular wipe and it says 99.9% kill, right? And you think, well, hot diggity, this is fantastic. This is pretty much going to get rid of everything. Well, let me tell you, it's estimated that on a square inch of skin, there's approximately 32 million bacteria. All right, 32 million on 1 square inch.
I can't even visually picture that. Like, that is so much.
I know, it's crazy, isn't it? So collectively, there's some 100 billion bacteria on the average human body. So that's just giving you some numbers to think about. And don't be afraid of that, because most of it is totally innocuous, of course. Or, my goodness, we'd all be walking zombies. So let's get back to killing this bacteria. So 99.9% in the world of science, we call that a 3-log reduction. And it's just a fancy name for a mathematical term used to describe how many of those colony forming units would remain. So I'm going to give you an example. Let's use 1 million. We start with 1 million colony forming units. If you buy a product that is 99.9%, which again sounds really good, you're going to leave behind 1,000 germs. 1,000. Now, those 1,000 germs it depends, like, say, take something like methicillin-resistant staphylococcus, MRSA. I mean, there's even Facebook groups for MRSA because it's so prevalent now. And what it means is antibiotic-resistant staph infection. And they do all kinds of studies on that. And the generation or doubling time for staphylococcus is approximately 24 minutes. So you have 1,000 of these germs doubling every 24 minutes, but then they double again, and then they double again, because the 1,000 goes to 2,000, goes to 4,000, goes to 8,000, and we're going 16, and it goes on and on. So my goodness, there's a problem. So here you are spending your money, going through the effort of disinfecting and cleaning something, but what's it leaving behind? Goodness.
Absolutely, right? That is huge.
Yeah. Yes. So in a clinical setting, now at home, you might get away with this because it's kind of a closed environment, and I probably don't have a ton of public people coming through like Grand Central Station. But in a medical environment where there is saliva or body fluid or anything going on, then we really have to be much more aware. Now, Micrylium disinfectants are what we call a 6-log, which means it's 99.9999% kill rate. Wow. So now we have this 1 million bugs, and we use the Micrylium. And don't forget, it is a 1-step product, so you can clean all the gross debris, all the dirt and skin cells and oil and whatever is going on there. You can clean all that away, and you're simultaneously disinfecting. That 1 million colony forming units will reduce to 1. Just 1.
That's wild. So
big
good.
Difference from
right?
1 to 1,000. And this is why when you see the popular grocery store wipes in a clinical setting, that's just no. I can't stress it enough. Maybe at home. And by the way, just for everybody's knowledge, you can use Micrylium products at home. You can use it around your children, around pets, and it has so many uses. And it just does the job like no other. So that's my little plug there.
That is such a great point. And I love that you mentioned that, because a lot of our listeners, I mean, you've seen it probably, especially in Ontario, a lot of, say, estheticians are doing a lot more home-based services, right? So
Exactly.
That is huge. If you're using, I don't want to say wrong, but disinfectants that are very, very harsh think of your pets, even if they're not in your surface room. I mean, aerosols are a thing, right? Like that's huge. Think of those kiddos that are walking by, etc. It's really important to, of course, get the intermediate disinfectant level for, as you mentioned, to get that kill amount down. Like that's enormous to get it down to 1. But then at the same time, you want to make sure whatever you're using is not only safe for, the client to kill your next client to kill all that bacteria, but also for yourself to be using, who else is in your environment, and then also the safety of your, say, table, chair, etc. So I know you're going to mention this, but remind us about how safe Micrylium is to use, say, on a vinyl chair, a leather chair, etc.
All right. All the ingredients in the formulations of, all the Micrylium products are USP grade ingredients. They are all biocompatible with the human body. So we have our USP grain ethanol, which would be the same. It's actually identical to, I think it's the Grey Goose vodka. Now, don't drink it because it has all kinds of soap and other stuff. So don't do that. But it's the same grade. And all of our surfactants are made from vegetables.
That's
so we're
huge.
not fighting. Yeah, we're not fighting with the human body. It's non-corrosive. All of the products are non-corrosive. They will not rust metal like a peroxide product, which is a reactive oxygen species. So you don't have any issue with rusting, and none of our products are dehydrating, so you can use it on leather. In fact, it's fantastic on leather because leather is pitted. It's not a smooth surface like glass or stainless steel. And within the Micrylium formula is a special blend of agents. And these special blend of agents help the formula to break surface tension. And what that means is if you ever wax your car and you'll see little beads of water, okay? That's because there's sort of the gap between that wax and between the water, a hydrophobic gap, right? The Micrylium products literally just completely saturate the area and they will go into the pitted area of the leather, but without any damage whatsoever. It does not yellow, it does not crack, it does not corrode. I often just for fun stand at the show and just spray it on myself. And, I haven't cracked yet. So
That's too good.
No harm, no foul.
And I can imagine the, different educators or different professionals at the show, if you're at a beauty show, a medical show, or a dental show, where they're probably just like eyeballs out staring at you, because can you imagine spraying yourself with, I don't want to say the brand, but the typical brands that we're using in the environment. You would never spray yourself with, say, a product that starts with a C, right? Like never ever. So that is huge. That's amazing.
Well, and there's times if you're wearing a like a scrub and somebody sneezed. And it's surprising how long cold germs and influenza and the coronavirus can live on fabric, like literally for days. So you can just give your lab coat or scrub a little spray down and get on with it, right?
That's so true. And I know this became more prevalent during COVID, at least in the dental industry, but there was a time when it was so common in the dental environment to wear your scrubs into work and wear your scrubs leaving work. And now that in the dental world is a huge no-no. You're not to show up in your scrubs, you're not to leave in your scrubs. But it was funny. I was actually I shouldn't say funny. It's just crazy to me that my sister-in-law, she's a nurse, and she came just this weekend. We met up at my brother's hockey game, and she was coming from a shift. She works at a general hospital. And guess what she was wearing?
Oh, no.
And I just looked at her and I'm like, you're in your scrubs. And she was like, yeah, we all wear our scrubs to and from work.
No. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it?
Right? Crazy.
And they do the studies. I mean, my goodness, we could cite 100 studies.
Oh, I can imagine.
On this sort of thing. I don't know.
So those of you who are listening, if You are currently wearing your clothes that you are working with patients in to and from your place of work. Reconsider that, because that is definitely a big germ carrier for sure, especially if you think about, you go and you pop your coat on and then you get home. And then when you go to pop that coat on again, like it's a never ending cycle, right? So that's something to definitely think about. So let's think about the teeth whitening or tooth gem provider, whether this is in the beauty industry or the dental office. What would you say? So our patient's done. We have our instruments. So Candy, we have some listeners who are in areas where they're using one-use disposables, so they don't need to do any heavier disinfectants, like they're not going to reuse, say, a retractor on the next client. But we do have some listeners who are, say, in states or provinces that are still allowing, say, cold soaking methods. So, what would you recommend? I know Micrylium has so many great products. Walk us through what you would recommend our listeners disinfecting with all their hard surfaces, and then those listeners that are allowed to cold soak, what you would recommend they do for those different materials.
All right. Well, if we're talking about strictly surface disinfection, I would definitely recommend the Biotext. And Biotext can be used, it is a clinical disinfectant. So it does reach a TB level in 3 minutes. Contact time is very important when you're disinfecting, by the way. So that liquid has to sit on the surface for 3 minutes and then be wiped up. But the Biotext you can use on any surface. Wood.
And that's huge to also note that a lot of competitors in this intermediate space say that they're a 1 minute kill time for advertising purposes. But if you actually read their labels, correct me if I'm wrong, there's actually not one company on the market that's 1 minute kill time for everything, correct?
Oh, no, I would correct you. The 1 minute kill time is our BioSurf product.
Okay, so BioSurf
that will kill everything in 1 minute. I don't necessarily recommend it in, well, of course, it's extremely popular and people buy the BioSurf all the time, but it is only for hard surfaces.
Okay, as Biotext, as you mentioned, can go on all surfaces.
Any surface. It doesn't matter. All surfaces. So whether it's leather or naugahyde or any kind of textile, use it. You can use it at home on your cutting board. If you're cutting chicken and you're worried about salmonella, spray it. So pretty much anything goes with the Biotext. And again, perfectly safe. Not that BioSurf isn't safe. It's, again, a very safe product, but it's only for hard surfaces. It's a much more powerful product. Yes, and the label is everything. Marketing is one thing, but the label, there's no getting away from the label. Let's put it that way. That's what you have to read. And then you'll know the truth of the matter. So yes, Biotext for all your surface disinfection. And then when it comes to instruments, and this goes back and forth, we have our BioMERS, which is an aseptic transport solution. So you're finished working with your instrument, you have a tray there with some BioMERS in it, and you put the instrument into the BioMERS, and within 1 minute, everything is disinfected.
So this is what we would consider a quote unquote cold soak solution.
Cold soak, yes.
Okay.
Now here's where we get into a wee debate. Depends on the circumstances. Is it a critical instrument? So, is blood involved? Then you're going to be using an autoclave. You're going to sterilize, right? So if it's being used by the autoclave, you can use the BioMERS and then take the instrument into the ultrasonic, get rid of all the gross debris, because an autoclave will not sterilize that instrument unless all the gross debris, and you can't see it with your naked eye. This is microscopic. Don't trust the eyeball.
That is such a great point, because I can definitely picture, in the dental industry, you're running behind, you're short on instruments. Sometimes you would skip the ultrasonic stage because you're like, well, I don't see anything. It must be fine.
Yeah, and of course we do. But then we get under an electron microscope and goodness knows what's clinging on there. And then the autoclave can't do the job. So you're just wasting time. So We go biotext for all your services. Text, I remember like all your textures. Bioson is for the ultrasonic, and that product has 4 different enzymes, digestive enzymes, and it has 4 different surfactants, and it's got a nice little hit of chlorhexidine. So it begins the infection control process right there. Gets rid of all the gross debris. If for some reason the person hasn't invested in an ultrasonic, which you can get on Amazon, they're not that expensive, about $100 or so. But just in case, you can put your instruments in a Tupperware container and put some Bioson in that and just swish it around. Try not to aerosolize it up your nose. Sorry.
Big tip, right?
Yeah, try and minimize that. Definitely. And the BioMERS is your cold soak. So you can do it in order of get all the gross debris off and then do your cold soak, give it a quick rinse, and then pack it up and get ready for the next client. Or you can do it the opposite way, put the instrument in the BioMERS, into the Bioson, clean off the gross debris after that, and then into the autoclave. It depends whether someone's using an autoclave. The aesthetic industry doesn't use it. Some do and some don't.
It's crazy to see the differences between dental and aesthetics, and then also even just the different, say, provinces or in the United States, etc. It's crazy how different every area is on their rules and regulations. It's wild.
Yes. So we just kind of go by microbiology. In order to kill a pathogen or a germ, you must make contact with it. You must make contact for the prescribed time. In order for an autoclave to work, you must remove the gross debris. You must. It doesn't work. These are very simple things. Now, the client has left, and you're going to deal with your instruments. You're going to use your ultrasonic, or you're going to use your Tupperware container. You're going to use your cold soak, and you're going to basically start at one end of the room, spray it all down. Make sure you're making contact with the surface so that it's wet. Walk around the room, and probably by the time you walk to the other end of the room, 3 minutes will have gone by, and you can start to wipe it all up. And when you're wiping it all up, you're getting all the gross debris, all the oils, everything that's there, and everything's dead. Well, except for that 1 out of the million. One little colony forming units there going, oh no, I'm all by myself. So everything's done. And you're done.
And
it's just not
then
that complicated.
I love that you mentioned that it doesn't have to be complicated. It can be done safe and effectively, easily.
Easy. Just consistency is the issue. Do it consistently. And don't take it for granted because you can't see it.
Yes, that's a big one too, right?
Right.
Aerosols are tiny.
Oh my goodness. And then if you're at home, throw the window open. Air your house out. That's what grandma used to do. And there was a good reason for that, because especially viruses like that, they like to float around in little micro droplets in the air. When you open the window, the air current wicks up the micro droplets, and then the virus is no longer viable. It needs that water.
Okay,
so, that's grandma knew.
Did she ever? Holy smokes, that's huge. Oh, I love that. So Katie, that's been so much great and useful information. So tell us, can you think of anything else that you feel like anyone in this industry of providing chairside services should know, or a helpful tip or trick on when it comes to, again, choosing disinfectants or how to do this safe and effectively? I feel like you definitely nailed that. Absolutely. I feel like you've nailed both. But is there anything else that you think that a helpful tip would be?
Well, what have we talked about? Contact time, saturation. We've talked about the safety of the products and consistent behavior. I think that, why does it have to be complicated? Like,
it's true. I feel like you did nail it. You got it all out.
I got it all out. Maybe we can finish with the frog.
Yes, we should. So, Candy, tell us, why does Micrylium have a frog as the logo?
All right. So many years ago, Micrylium participated in an amphibian breeding program. And so people that were breeding these frogs were having a problem. The frogs and tadpoles were dying because every time they used another disinfectant, the frogs that breathed through their skin, they just weren't surviving. So they asked Micrylium, would you help us out? Could we try your disinfectant? What do you think? And so the owner of the company said, all right. And he donated some disinfectant to this amphibian breeding program. And the frogs and the tadpoles lived and were quite safe. And then this was noticed by the World Wildlife Foundation. And we formed an affiliation with them. And really, it all just started with the frogs because they're just so sensitive.
That is incredible. Like, that is, I mean, if that doesn't show you how safe and effective a product is, I mean, I don't know what else would, right?
Yes, exactly. And I mean, we have a joke at Micrylium. Definitely Micrylium products can kill the staph, but they won't kill the staph.
That is so good. So good. So, Candy, if our listeners, which I know they will, are going to be like, holy smokes, I need Micrylium in my clinic, in my business yesterday. Where's the best? Can they go online? I mean, hint, hint, wink, wink. We definitely would recommend purchasing through your favorite dealer, which might be Fern Whitening Supplies, but just remind our listeners that you are the manufacturer. So to purchase Micrylium, they do have to go through authorized dealers, correct?
That is correct. And we do love ferns, so highly recommend.
Right? So right now, remind us that we have, of course, a lot of listeners in Canada, but our American listeners, if they're like, holy smokes, I need Micrylium, where can they, is it best to reach out to you directly, or is there on your site? I know you have a dealer locator. Can they pop on and find dealers in the United States?
Yes, and they can contact us and we can always give them an updated list of where it's available in the United States, like the distributors and also in Canada.
Perfect. Amazing. Well, Candy, thank you so much. Is there anything else you want to leave for our audience, or do you feel like you are perfect with how everything went? I think it went amazingly. I know this episode's going to be one of our top listened for sure.
I'd just like to leave everyone with the idea that we all deserve to be respectful of each other and live a healthy life. And that's really what Micrylium's all about.
Yes, right. You have filled the gap to keep not only the clients safe, but also the providers safe, which is literally the only company on the market that's doing that. So that is massive.
Well, thank you. And thank you to Dean Swift.
Yes, yes. Thank you. Like, such an incredible company that he has built. So good. So, Candy, where can we follow along if we want to stay up to date with, say, if Micrylium is running webinars or, at different trade shows, etc.? Would you say the website that we'll link is the best spot to find that info?
Yes, we'll be updating all the events and things that we're participating in. And I want to thank you, Rachel, for having me on today and giving us an opportunity to showcase our philosophy and our products.
Yes. Well, thank you, Candy. So those of you who are listening, thank you so much for listening to another episode of Whitening Wednesday. We'll be back next week.